okay? That's why people aren't creating what they want to create, because they're not being here and they're not being in the now, right? Their mind is somewhere else, and their mind is sometime else, okay? Instead of bringing it here now and actually learning about the requirements for doing something about what's going on in the here and now, and then actually doing that through an act of will. People don't want to hear that. They want to hear some portal is going to open any moment right next to, right on your street where you're living. You're going to be able to walk through that and go into another world where all of this isn't happening. The whole idea of the rapture, okay? It's just another variant of the rapture. We're going to ascend to another dimension of being, and all the consciousness, the individual units of consciousness that don't get what's really going on, they're going to remain here on the physical earth. Well, this is all New Age mumbo-jumbo, and it's all stuff that's all wishful thinking. It's just like, put your head down and do everything that the master tells you to do, in this reality, in this lifetime, and then you'll magically be gifted with a wonderful life in some hereafter, in some afterlife, okay? Which is, what the controllers told people in the ancient world to get them hooked onto these religious notions of, a promise of an afterlife, and therefore they would accept their life of slavery and misery in this life. Okay? We have to learn to be here now, be in the present moment, and look at what's going on where we are in this place, instead of concerning ourselves with other dimensions and other times. Okay? I'm not saying none of that exists, but that's not where we're operating. We're operating on Earth at this moment. That's where we have to start from. So, go back to what we were talking about. This is about polarity, right? And polarity does exist here in this dimension where we're operating. So the first expression of natural law is what I call a generative polarity. So the word generative, it comes from the Latin genere. The verb genere in Latin means to create. So this, you could call this the creative polarity. The polarity that we use to create the outcome. Okay? So that's the first expression of natural law. The second expression I call, and again, we'll get into what the positive and negative aspects are in a moment, but the second expression is the initiating expression, or the initiatory expression, however you want to word it. You could just say how it starts, the starting expression. Okay? When you choose one of the creative polarities to work with, something manifests almost right away. Okay? You are going to go into a mode of consciousness based on what you've chosen with that creative polarity. So that's the starting condition. You could say, here's how it starts out of the gates. That's how you want to look at the initiatory expression of natural law. So we have the creative polarity. That's the force that we work with. Then something happens when we start using that. That's the starting expression. A simple, easy term of putting it is the starting expression. Okay? Then we have, as the starting expression continues to work, we have the internalized expression. This is the thing that's going on within the human being, or I would say it's what ultimately gets created or generated within the individual unit of consciousness, the individual, the monad, again, okay? This is what happens inside of us, right? So that's the internal expression for natural law. Then, of course, if there's an internal expression, there's going to be an external expression, okay? So that's what happens in the aggregate, meaning in the total. Okay, that's what happens in society, in any given society where there are individuals. Okay, so we have an internalized expression and then an externalized expression. All right, and then we have the ending manifestation, the ending expression. You could look at this as the opposite of the initiating expression. Okay, something starts and then something ultimately gets made. All right, so this is going to be based on, this is the result that we create based on all the other things. All right, that we just went through. The creative polarity that we chose, the starting expression, the internal and external expressions, and then something gets manifested. So this is what I simply call the manifestation. You could call it the end expression, okay, or the result, either any way you want to look at it. Okay, these are just terms that we apply to help understand the model better. All right? So this is the manifested result that we create based on the creative polarity that we chose. So let's look at each one of these dynamics. Again, I went through 5 dynamics, right? And they each have a positive expression and a negative expression. Or you could look at the positive and negative sides or poles in this model as here's the things that we could do that will get us what we say we want, and here's the things that we could choose that will never get us the things that we say we want. That's the simplest way of looking at this is if you look at the positive expressions for these 5 dynamics as here are the requirements to obtaining what we want. And the negative expressions are if we do these things or let these things continue to be done, then it's impossible to obtain what we want.
And not the governments to be taken away. The Constitution was written to prevent the government from doing that, except when it does it by due process. Due process means if I rob the bank and they want to take away my freedom, they have to give me a jury trial and the full panoply of protections that come with it. The governor can't just arrest me, as the governor of New Jersey did, not me, he'd like to, 2 weeks ago with a nurse who got off the airplane at Newark Airport because she had been treating Ebola victims in Western Africa. Before she could get on another plane to Maine, they locked her up. They put her in a tent in a parking lot in downtown Newark. They gave her a bottle of water, a granola bar, and a porta potty. If she had been charged with murder and had been lodged in the Essex County Jail a mile away, she would have had better creature comforts and a more secure environment than a parking lot tent in downtown Newark. And I made the argument that the governor of New Jersey has flipped natural rights. You see, natural rights, you can summarize them in 3 words. 4 words. The presumption of liberty. The presumption of liberty, meaning we are self-directed. We make our own choices. It is not our obligation, as New Jersey claimed was the case for the nurse, to prove we are unworthy of incarceration. It is the government's profound, unique obligation to prove that we are worthy of incarceration, and it must do so before a jury of our peers. An imperfect system, but the best system that we can come up with. In fact, when the governor of New Jersey was told, there's not a federal judge in Newark that will fail to give her a hearing, and we have no evidence that she's contagious at the hearing, you better let her go now, because if you lose in court, you know, your friend at Fox News is going to make sure everybody knows that you knew the law and didn't follow it anyway. So he let her go right then and there. And then his buddy, the governor of Maine, tried the same thing. And there they went to a federal court who released her because the government could not overturn the presumption of liberty. The presumption of liberty says the rights that we did not surrender to the government, we retained for ourselves. And they can never be taken away from us by popular vote or majority in the legislature or a command by a governor or a president. Now, if the government recognized the concept of natural rights, it would know that virtually everything it has done, certainly since the progressive era, at the beginning of the last century, and perhaps even since the Alien and Sedition Acts, virtually everything it has done other than to protect natural rights has been wrong. Question, is there any legitimate activity government has in a free society? Answer, yes. To protect the natural rights of the people in that society. Meaning instead of assaulting my freedom, my life, my liberty, and my property, protect it. That's what we have a government for. And a government that believes in natural rights will limit itself to those behaviors. Do you know, have you ever heard of, anywhere in the universe today, of a government that limits itself only to the protection of natural rights? That, of course, would be our Rothbardian, Jeffersonian, John Lockean, Thomistic, as in St. Thomas Aquinas, ideal. Will this happen tomorrow? No. Will it happen in the lifetime of anyone in this room? Maybe within the lifetime of the youngest in this room. And that's why we're all in this room today. We need to understand the force of darkness among us. And that force of darkness is the very government we have elected and empowered to impose the darkness upon us. The better we understand it, the more we understand it, the sooner we can be free from its shackles. I expect that when I die, I will do so peacefully in my bed, surrounded by people that love me and faithful to first principles. That will not happen to everybody in this room. Some of you, particularly the young people, must be prepared to die in a government prison. And some of you, particularly the young people, must be prepared to die in a government town square to the sound of government trumpets blaring. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. Because freedom lies in everyone's heart. But it must do more than just lie there. Thank you, and God love you.
I've said in past presentations, sometimes I sit up at night and laugh at the ridiculousness of what I do. Really. I laugh at how ridiculous having to present basic information like this is. And yet the majority of human beings, it's falling on deaf ears. The following actions are examples of the initiation of aggression against others, which is what all wrongdoings are. These actions are violations against natural rights and therefore constitute violence. Murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, and coercion. And you could think all you want about any wrongdoing that can possibly be committed. I've challenged many, many people to do this, and you will recognize every single wrongdoing that can be committed against another human being is a form of theft. There is only one wrong, theft, in one form or another, and there is only one law in the universe. Don't steal. That's it. Every wrongdoing comes down to an act of theft, provably. Murder is the taking without just cause of the life of another, which does not belong to you. Assault is the taking without just cause of another being's physical well-being, which does not belong to you. Rape is the taking of another's free will sexual consent, which does not belong to you. Theft is the taking of property, physical property, which does not belong to you. Trespass is the taking of the security of another person in their domain, in their dwelling place, which does not belong to you to take. Coercion is the taking of another being's free will, which does not belong to you to take. Every wrongdoing is a form of theft. There's no wrongdoing anyone can think of that is not a form of theft. Natural law versus man's law. Natural law is based upon principles and truth which are inherent to creation. Man's law is based upon dogmatic belief systems which are the constructs of a diseased mind. Natural law is only ever harmonized with due to knowledge and understanding, or not harmonized with due to ignorance. Man's law, on the other hand, is only complied with due to fear of punishment. Natural law is universal. It exists and applies anywhere in the universe, regardless of location. Man's law differs with location based upon the whim of the legislators who are making up these decrees and commands. And that is a form of moral relativism, the idea that we can decide what right and wrong are, that they are not objective and inherent to creation because they are based upon actions. Natural law is eternal and immutable. That means it exists and applies for as long as the universe exists, and it cannot ever be changed by any action that any being within the universe can do. Man's law, on the other hand, changes with time based upon the whim of legislators, which is also moral relativism. If a man-made law is in harmony with natural law, it follows logically that it is redundant, since it is stating a truth that is inherent, pre-existing, eternal, and self-evident, or it should be self-evident. Therefore, man's law is both irrelevant and unnecessary. If a man-made law is in opposition to natural law, it follows logically that it is both false, meaning it is incorrect, and it is immoral, meaning it is harmful. It results in harm to other beings. Or in other words, it's wrong. Therefore, man's law that is in opposition to natural law can never be legitimately binding upon anyone. Therefore, I say throw all of man's law out. We don't need it. We only need to understand and bring our behavior into compliance with natural law. That's it. And then we would experience a society based in freedom. Because as we engage in moral behavior, a society in the aggregate becomes more free. And as we engage in immoral behavior, a society in the aggregate becomes more enslaved. That is the natural law of freedom. There is a law that governs the freedom of a whole society. As morality increases, freedom increases. As morality declines, freedom declines. And there's only one real kind of anarchist, and that is the anarchist that understands all authority, all government is slavery, and the only solution is moral behavior under natural law. That's what an anarchist really is. The word anarchy comes from the Greek prefix an, meaning without, the absence of, and the Greek noun archon, meaning master or ruler. Anarchy does not mean without rules. It does not mean chaos. It does not mean disorder. It does not mean, quote unquote, lawlessness when it comes to moral law. It literally means without rulers, without masters, and archon, without masters, meaning no masters, no slaves. And if you say the phrase no masters, no slaves to the average person, and you say word association game, tell me the first word that comes to your mind when I say no masters, no slaves, they'll say freedom. But I just gave you the etymological meaning of a word from its root language, and the word literally means without masters. And yet people think it means chaos and lawlessness and disorder instead of what it really means, freedom. That is what the word anarchy actually means by its very definition. So we have to understand the solution is living in a society, in a state of existence where we don't have a master class and a slave class, a ruling class and a ruled class. All of us are already ruled by natural law, and we need to simply bring our behaviors into alignment with those laws by thinking, feeling, and doing what is right. So this is the continuing human condition, and the great work is to end that condition. That is what the great work is, and that's why so few people want any part of it, because it's not the lighthearted little party. It's the one great work.